Since 1921, the Coterie of Social Workers Trinidad and Tobago Incorporated, a women's organization started by Audrey Lane Jeffers, Shakonia Medal Gold, and Order of the British Empire, has provided many social services. Best known are the school feeding programs, day nurseries, women hostels, and the introduction of Mother's Day and Universal Children's Day. This year, the Coterie has continued to initiate an annual Women Awareness webinar. The fourth webinar builds consciousness on aging. Aging Empowerment Series, navigating the journey to vitality, purpose, and well-being. These webinars will take place on Zoom every Wednesday, 6 to 8 p.m. from the 12th of June to the 10th of July 2024. Come and prepare yourself for this normal process that we will all experience. Explore the global aging agenda and our national responses, perceptions of the elderly and resulting risk factors, abuse of the elderly, health, finances, legal issues, social isolation experiences of persons as they get older, aging, the climate change, and the information era, caregiving and aging. Are you prepared? Empower yourself for the stage of life with vitality, purpose, and well-being.
I would like to know how everyone is feeling today. Remember, old is the new young. So I hope everyone is feeling just as they want to feel, whether old, whether young. Choice is yours. Now, like everything else, we want a divine intervention in all that we do. So I would like to say an opening prayer. Lord, we thank thee for today and for the opportunity to share our knowledge and experiences with this audience. May our presentations bring light to the world. Help the presenters to give of their best and to be strong as they address the issues at hand. May we find answers to all questions and solutions to all of life's problems. Meet every need, O Lord, and help us to love one another and live always in peace. My empathy and prayers go out to those affected by Hurricane Beryl. I wish you all a speedy recovery from this natural disaster. Dr. Joseph will deal with climate change and speak to this. I would just like to share one quote from an unknown author. Life is not measured by the number of breaths we take, but by the moments that take our breath away. This is our moment. The time is now. We are not guaranteed tomorrow. So let us make rich memories that we can cherish. The theme for this webinar is preparing for aging. As you can see on the flyer, but before we move on to today's final presentations, I would like you all to state, which country you all are from, which you are listening from. For example, if you are from the United States, you can say, my name is John. If you wish to share your name, I am from US. So Do we have any volunteers? At least four will be fine.
I am Marge Frampton Benskin from Trinidad.
Okay, welcome Trinidad. Anyone else?
Hi, my name is Sandra Latibadir. I'm from Jamaica.
Oh, welcome Jamaica. Thank you. Anyone else?
Yes, I am Vicky Mendez Charles. I'm from Trinidad and Tobago.
Okay, Trinity to the bone. All right.
Correct.
Oh, anyone else? Just one more. Anyone else? Okay, well, I am from Trinidad and Tobago as well.
Oh, okay.
All right. So let me give you a brief recap with my colleague Anika. Would you like to come in with the yes? Let me give you a brief recap of the Women's Aware webinar, Aging Empowerment Series, Navigating the Journey to Vitality, Purpose and Well-Being. That started since June 12th, 2024. That is geared towards not only empowering women, but men as well. Men can learn also. So in webinar 1, the theme was the dynamics of aging. Ms. Crystal Oliver addressed the global agenda on aging, and Samantha Thomas dealt with the national patterns. Then we moved on to webinar 2 the following week, where we dealt with finances, health, and major legal issues, which were adequately addressed by Dr. Heather Harewood and Dr. Maria Gomes and Gad James. The following week, we held another webinar, which is the third webinar, on June 26th, and the theme was Ageism and its Impact, dealing with topics such as perceptions of aging and resulting risk factors and elderly abuse in family and residential care, which were presented by Dr. Camille Cummins and yours truly, Diane Grant. Then the last week, we had another presentation on the theme, Elderly and a New Normal, where Dr. Michael James, librarian, adequately addressed aging and the information age. And we move on to a panel discussion with Dr. Annette Cambridge, who taught us how to take care of ourselves. That is very important as we grow younger, with her presentation on aging and caregiving in a panel discussion with Dr. Hyacinth Blake and Dr. Shalene Gomes. The journey continues. Today, at the conclusion of this year's series, our theme is Preparing for Aging. We have two presenters, Dr. Deborah Joseph, who will present Aging and Climate Change, and Dr. Jennifer Rouse, who will present on preparing for the third and fourth chapters of aging. I'm excited to hear those presentations. I would like you to know that we will facilitate questions after the two presentations, so you can make notes and hold on to your questions. I know you might be anxious to ask questions. Hold on to your questions until the end of the presentations. So if you wish to unmute at the end or applaud, you can go into reactions and raise your hands, and then you can make your comment. We also be sending an evaluation form for you to complete at the end of the sessions. So let's get right into it. I'd like to first introduce Dr. Deborah Joseph, who will present on the topic Aging and Climate Change. Dr. Deborah Joseph is a coordinator and tenured lecturer in social work at the University of the West Indies, Cape Verde, Barbados, and a graduate coordinator. She is also a clinical social worker who has worked with individuals and families over 14 years and is involved with issues of HIV/AIDS, She is an avid supporter, researcher, and publisher of topics relating to social work's involvement in climate change, environmental sustainability, and domestic violence. Dr. Joseph supports the North in 3 EU initiative on domestic violence at the University of Huddersfield and has analyzed the men and youth aspect of the qualitative segment for Barbados and Grenada. She is presently an honorary consultant at that establishment. Dr. Joseph has recently completed research on the Women Fisherfolk Barbados, a gendered lens research project, and female-headed households. That must have been quite interesting. Aftermath of Hurricane Maria. Dr. Joseph is a recipient of the Jeremy Collymore Award for Research in Humanitarian Response and Disaster Risk Management 2019. She also won a scholarship to attend the Women Deliver Conference in Vancouver, that is Canada, in 2019 because of her enlightening research on gender issues. Dr. Joseph, again, has, in her Hall of Fame, has published her first book entitled The Impact of Climate Change on Vulnerable Population, which can be accessed online. Thank you very much for being here, Dr. Joseph, to grace us with your presence and presentation. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much, Diane, for that introduction. And without further ado, I will share my presentation. My presentation this evening is going to be on aging and climate change. So we're going to start off with some definitions. What is aging? Aging refers to the process of becoming older. We all know that and we feel it. A process that is genetically determined and environmentally modulated. Some statistics. By 2050, the number of people aged 60 years and older is expected to double, reaching 2.1 million globally. And that is something we really have to exclaim about. And let's look at some of the aging population demographic trends. Populations in all regions are aging, even in the Caribbean. So much so is a worrying concern for Barbados. And there, in 2019, there were 703 million persons aged 65 or over. By 2050, this number is projected to reach 1.5 billion. So we see the aging population continues to grow and is of concern to many countries. So we must pay attention to this. What is climate change? Climate change refers to significant changes in global temperatures, because as you realize, temperatures are hotter in our Caribbean islands, and the weather patterns over time. While climate change is a natural phenomenon, scientific evidence shows that human activities have been its primary driver since the 1800s. Some aspects of climate change are increased temperatures, sea level rise, and more frequent extreme weather events, as we are seeing. I will talk about that a little later. Let's look at what is climate change adaptation, a brief video.
Climate change is causing all sorts of problems for our planet, making it harder for plants and animals to live here, and for the people too. The places we live and work are being affected more by blizzards, hurricanes, and flooding. The crops we grow for food are suffering more, have not enough water,
I know,
and
Ventura.
too much. And playing soccer or riding a bike during a heat wave? I don't think so. The effects of climate change can harm our communities, food supplies, and way of life, and be dangerous to our health and safety. Hopefully, we can slow down or stop our climate from continuing
Well,
to
what was
change.
wrong with Ventura?
But most of the changes cannot be
Oh, well,
undone. We need to learn how to live with these changes. We need to learn how to adapt to them.
exactly. He went and he did
Climate
service
change
time,
adaptation
and he really did a lot of work.
we adapt or change how we do things to make it easier
They're going to walk the walk.
about changing climate. It is designing communities so they are protected from flooding. It is taking care of water supplies to help farmers when there is too much or too little rain. It is planting rooftop gardens on buildings to help keep our cities cooler and use less energy, and so much more. You and I, we need to keep fighting climate change. But for the changes that are here to stay, climate change adaptation will help us stay fed, comfortable, and safe.
Okay, that was a brief video on climate change adaptation, and what it is. Okay, so let's look at climate change on the elderly. Let's look at the health risk. I don't know, I'm hearing a voice. I don't know if persons can mute their mics, please.
It's Hazel, but she isn't here.
Dr. Joseph, I muted a couple of persons, so I'm muting them as we go through. But if persons can also ensure that their mics are muted, that will also be appreciated. I think
yes, because
be okay. Yes, I think you should be okay now. I muted everyone.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Anika. All right, so let's look at the impacts of climate change on the elderly. And let's first examine the health risk. The elderly, they are vulnerable to extreme weather. Older adults are more susceptible to heat waves, extreme cold, and other extreme weather events. Their bodies are less able to regulate temperature, and they often have pre-existing health conditions that can be exacerbated by extreme temperatures. They might also be experiencing factors associated with advancing age, such as diabetes, cardiovascular impairments, and heat sensitivity. And we know in the Caribbean, a lot of our residents and a lot of our individuals suffer from NCDs, as when we look at the World Health Organization statistics. Now, empirical evidence have shown that a 1 degree Celsius rise in temperature can affect the mortality and morbidity of the elderly. That is how critical this is and crucial that we pay attention to this. Let's look at the air quality. Poor air quality, which can be worsened by climate change, affects older adults more severely, leading to respiratory issues such as asthma and other lung diseases. As you all know, the haze is increasing, coming across the Atlantic Ocean. And sometimes even the Barbados Weather Station, as well as the Trinidad and Tobago Weather Station, will issue notices about the haze. And they warn people to make sure that either you wear a mask or you have your medication on you. So we see that air quality is also deteriorating because of the haze that is coming across from the across the Atlantic to us. Then we look at vector-borne diseases. Climate change can expand the range of diseases like dengue fever, West Nile virus, and the Lyme disease. Older adults with generally weaker immune systems are more at risk of severe outcomes from these diseases. That is why it's so important. Nutrition is so important for the elderly. We have to look at a balanced diet, and we have to look at what they eat. Heat waves. Older adults are more vulnerable to heat-related illnesses due to reduced thermoregulatory capacity, as we saw above. And another empirical report states that the most foreboding climate stressors facing the elderly are heat waves, hurricane, flooding, droughts, poor air quality, and infectious disease. So they are really, really vulnerable to these events and to the climate change events out there. So our awareness must be peaked and increased as to how best we can support the elderly during this time. So now let's look at what Beryl did. And we're looking at disasters in the Caribbean, and we're looking at extreme weather events. Hurricane Beryl was the strongest hurricane in history. I will repeat. Hurricane Beryl is the strongest hurricane in history to form in June in the Atlantic Ocean. That's to tell you how the climate change is affecting us here in the Caribbean. Initially a tropical depression, because we know that hurricanes start from a tropical depression, it goes to a tropical storm, and then a hurricane based on the wind speed. It intensified into a Category 4 storm and briefly reached Category 5 status, with winds up to 240 kilometers per hour or 150 miles per hour. The island of Curacao in Grenada has been virtually flattened, right? And also, the situation is deemed as a very complicated crisis. Why? Because it is marked with severe logistical and access challenges. And it's important to remember that statement. The bottom picture, the first picture we see on the right is what Beryl looked like. We can't even see the Caribbean islands if you look at the top right-hand corner. Beryl just took over everything in its sight. It was a needle that threaded every Caribbean island, most of them, and went on to Mexico and went on to do so much damage in Texas. Look at that cloud formation. And the first picture down, you will see the damage that was done in Grenada. Second picture down, this is Union Island in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And these are people who prepare to board a ferry to reach shelter in the wake of Hurricane Beryl. Now, I put this slide in for you all to just, it is recent and is in everybody's minds. So put the elderly in context in what happened with Beryl. Imagine elderly persons on that ferry going across to get help. What condition are they in? Are they being fed? Are they being taken care of? Is special attention being given to them? Look at the ferry with the persons on it. And bear in mind, think about the elderly in a situation like that. Think about the elderly in Curacao in Grenada, where everything was flattened and roofs were blown off from most of the houses. What is happening to the elderly in these situations? So as I continue my presentation, I want you all to keep that in mind. Natural disasters. And keeping Beryl in mind, let's look at the evacuation challenges. We have limited mobility with the elderly and dependence on caregivers that can make evacuation difficult during disasters, because sometimes we have bulletins that come out and tell people to stay in your homes, do not come out of your homes, secure your property. And then sometimes the caregivers do not live with the elderly person, so they can't get to the elderly person to help them. So what is happening to those persons who may live alone or who depend on a caregiver that cannot get to them? These are logistics that we have to be concerned about. Let's look at mental health and well-being. Sometimes mental health is low down on the scale of health, but we need to really raise it to a higher rung on the ladder. Stress and anxiety. The increasing frequency and severity of climate-related disasters can lead to heightened stress and anxiety among older adults. As I said, keep Beryl in mind, right? The fear of losing homes, communities, and the sense of security can take a significant toll on mental health. Imagine the average human being seeing their home blown away or flattened because of a hurricane, if you understand what I mean. And imagine what the elderly may be feeling. Then we look at isolation. Displacement and damage to infrastructure can lead to social isolation, which is already a concern for many older adults. Isolation can worsen mental health issues and reduce access to necessary services and support systems. And as I mentioned before, even these adverse weather events can make the elderly even more isolated because the caregivers cannot get to them. So let's look at the socio-economic impacts. Look at the economic strain. Many older adults live on fixed incomes, which can be strained by increased costs associated with climate change, such as higher energy bills during extreme weather or costs related to relocation from areas severely impacted by climate change. We look at displacement. Climate change can lead to displacement from homes to rising sea levels, increased flooding, or severe weather, as we can see with Beryl, because we see a lot of the residents were on a ferry leaving to go to find places of shelter. Older adults may find it more challenging to relocate and rebuild their lives in new locations. Food security. Climate change can affect agriculture and food production, leading to higher food prices and reduced availability of nutritious foods. Older adults, particularly those on fixed incomes, may struggle to afford healthy diets. Healthcare costs. Increased prevalence of climate-sensitive diseases in the elderly leads to higher healthcare expenses. And we look at impact on pensions. Economic instability due to climate change can affect pension funds and savings. And then we look at social services. Sometimes, imagine a pensioner, when we look at the pension benefits, it's not much. So imagine having to deal with having to use your savings like for relocation and to buy food that have increased in prices. It's going to be a real heavy burden on the elderly. I mean, on the ordinary person, much less the elderly. And we look at the social services, increased demand, more older adults will require social services from healthcare to housing assistance as climate impacts intensity. Somebody has drawn over the PowerPoint.
Yes,
so what I'm going to...
the person from the room, Deborah, so
okay.
I'm just waiting to see. I'm just waiting to see what will happen again, but they will remove them blocked.
Okay, so I'm going to stop share and share again. Okay? If that's okay. Right, so it's much better. Thank you, Anika. So we look at the social services, the increased demand. More older adults will require social services. So you know that is going to be a burden on the healthcare and also housing assistance as climate impacts intensify. So we have to look at it. Let me just recap. Economic strain, displacement, food security, healthcare costs, impact on pensions, and social services. These are part of the socio-economic impacts. And let's look at the community and care systems. We have a strain on healthcare services. The healthcare system may become strained due to the increasing needs of older adults affected by climate change. More frequent and severe weather events can lead to spikes in demand for medical care, exacerbating existing challenges in healthcare provision for older populations. And folks, we know in the Caribbean, our healthcare services are already under a lot of strain, as people can attest to, and people have reported. So imagine that for the elderly. Let's look at the emergency response. Older adults may require more assistance during evacuations and emergencies. Ensuring that emergency response plans consider the specific needs of older adults is crucial for their safety and well-being. Again, we revisit burial. What were the response plans for Grenada, St. Vincent, Jamaica, Barbados? Did they have any emergency response plans that consider the specific needs of older adults? And we see this is crucial for their safety and their well-being. Let's look at some case examples. Heat waves in Europe. For example, the 2003 European heat wave resulted in over 70,000 excess deaths, many among older adults. And what about Hurricane Katrina? You all remembered Hurricane Katrina in 2005? For example, older adults face significant challenges during evacuation and recovery, highlighting the need for targeted disaster preparedness and response strategies. Katrina was unprecedented because of a failure to protect or evacuate older people effectively. Moving along, so let's look at the adaptation and mitigation strategies. Let's look at health infrastructure. We need to strengthen systems. We need to improve healthcare facilities and training to manage climate-related health issues among the elderly. We also need community support networks. Develop local community networks to provide support and resources to older adults during climate events. Building community resilience through support networks can help older adults cope with the impacts of climate change, and social workers could identify with this. This includes community centers, and we all have these in the Caribbean, local health services. We have these in the Caribbean, and volunteer programs tailored to assist older individuals. I just want to say that each one of us could volunteer or find an organization where we can volunteer to help to even develop programs and support systems and groups to help the older adults. Let's look at urban planning, something that we neglect in the Caribbean. We need to have age-friendly cities. We need to design cities that are resilient to climate change and accommodate the needs of the older adults, such as shaded areas and accessible transportation. The transportation is an issue. Are our buses fitted in a way that it can go down to the pavement so that the elderly person can get into the bus? What about our maxi taxis and taxis? Are they, user-friendly? Because I have been in maxis that the driver will see an elderly person at the side of the road and they with a cane or something, and they wouldn't stop, even though the person indicated that they wanted a ride. It seems as if, the time they take to get into the vehicle, cuts down on the time the driver could be picking up other passengers along the way. So we have to look at these. These things remain unnoticed in our country. It's so subtle and slight that we are not aware of it. So it's important that we become aware of that in terms of accessible transportation for our elderly population. And let's look at the policy recommendations that we can have. And of course, the first on the list is government action. We need to have inclusive policies Policymakers need to consider the unique vulnerabilities and needs of older adults when designing climate adaptation and mitigation strategies. This includes ensuring that disaster response plans, urban planning, and health services are age inclusive. We need to implement policies that protect the elderly from climate impacts, such as heat action plans and improved emergency services. And we have to sit back and ask ourselves, what are we doing presently? Is this part of our policy? Is it in the making? Does it exist? So these are questions that we are supposed to be asking presently. Let's look at international cooperation, the global efforts. Encourage international collaboration to share best practices and resources for protecting older adults from climate change. This can be done in the Caribbean also. We can have it regionally. We pay attention to what is happening. And I believe we each have best practices that the other can adopt. The role of technology, let us not forget that. Let us look at innovations. We need assistive technologies, use of health monitoring devices, and telemedicine to manage health conditions exacerbated by climate change. And this is an example of the different monitoring devices that we can have. And we need to have smart homes, technological integration, develop smart home technologies to create safe and comfortable living environments for older adults, enhancing their ability to withstand climate impacts. So let's look at some general recommendations as I end my presentation. The interplay between aging and climate change presents complex challenges. We all could agree on that require comprehensive and inclusive approaches. Emphasis on comprehensive and inclusive. Addressing these issues involve recognizing the vulnerabilities of older adults, enhancing community and healthcare support systems, and ensuring that policies are designed with an awareness of the unique needs of the aging population. By doing so, we can work towards creating a more resilient and inclusive society capable of facing the dual challenges of aging and climate change. Climate change and rapid population aging are occurring together. Please be mindful of that. Their combined efforts on the health and well-being of older people, those now and in the future, will have to be much better understood and addressed urgently by policymakers and planners everywhere. Older people have been neglected in studies of climate change. I put this in bold. So to encourage persons out there to do research with the elderly and climate change. And the neglect should be redressed in the context of the mega trend of rapid population aging everywhere. Older people are agents of change in actions for the climate and for the social transformations necessary to adapt to, mitigate, and build resilience to different climate change scenarios. Although older persons are a widely diverse group, many are disproportionately affected by climate change because of their greater physiological susceptibility, pre-existing health conditions, disability, and social vulnerability, particularly when they live alone or in poor urban areas and are less capable of responding. Please pay attention to these points. Older people must be protected from climate-related threats. This must be built into multi-sectorial policy and program actions in cities and communities and across systems with greener environments, less air pollution, adapted housing and health services, more susceptible food systems. I repeat, more sustainable food systems for healthier diets and health promotion for well-being. nutrition is so important. So as I conclude, I will just summarize some of the key points. Aging populations are growing. It is a fact. And they face unique challenges due to climate change. Effective adaptation and mitigation strategies are essential to protect older adults. Policies and technologies must be leveraged to create resilient and supportive environments. There is a call to action. I urge communities and policymakers to take proactive steps to address the intersection of aging and climate change. Thank you for listening to my presentation, and thank you. I hope I can bring awareness to this in a poignant way so that we can follow up on this call for action and do something, because it doesn't take much. It starts with the individual and then goes to a group, and it can filter into the community. So thank you for listening to my presentation. Thank you, Anika.
Wow. Thank you, Dr. Rose. That was a very comprehensive presentation. It is so educational. Since I'm presently in Canada, I understand, right now we are going through summer and the impact of this heat wave on the elderly. We have many instances where, persons die because of the heat. And even in winter time, when it's very cold, people freeze to death and things like that if they're not warm enough. So thank you again for that most enlightening presentation. All right? Yes. Okay, we shall now go on to our next presenter. Dr. Rouse is a gerontologist and policy analyst. She attended the University of Maryland, Baltimore County during the years 1996 to 2004, where she completed a double major in social work and Africana studies, and graduated with a bachelor's degree cum laude in May 1998. In August 2001, this scholar graduated with her master's degree in policy sciences with an area of concentration in aging issues. And in 2004, she graduated with her doctorate in public policy and aging issues. Her doctoral thesis is entitled A Case Study in Aging Policy in Trinidad and Tobago, the Role of Interest Groups in Defining New Policy Initiatives. In August 2003 to 2018, Dr. Rouse assumed duties as Director of the Division of Aging in the Ministry of Social Development. She was appointed as part-time lecturer in social gerontology at the University of the West Indies, St. Augustine in 2004 and until 2021. Dr. Rouse, the pleasure is mine to give over the floor to you.
Good evening.
Thank you.
Good evening to all my viewers, listeners. It's a pleasure to be here. And again, before I forget, thanks to the Coterie for even hosting this 5-part series. So I don't have to go over material that was shared in the other 4 because that would be now redundant. My chapters are the 3rd and 4th. I don't even know if the average person knew or even considered their life as being one charted in chapters. But so it is, because of the mere fact that we are living longer than expected. We're dealing with the facts. The human lifespan is now 120, all things being equal and natural. Yet we hear in one of our holy books, they would always laud 70, almost as a peak, like a Mount Everest. If we get there, we have done well. Well, that 70, which is 70, that is now midlife. And so I am boasting that I'm in my midlife, and I feel very esteemed to be a member of the group. So I am squarely in the third chapter. So I deliberately chose not to have slides because this is a talk. I have to reach my people where you are stationed. Some of you will not even be 60 yet, but it is good that you get an idea of what to look forward to, what to expect. And I'm sure you got some of that if you had tuned into some of the previous ones. So interestingly, in the chapters of life, we have our formative years, we have our youth, we have our adulthood, and then we have senescence. So senescence, as it entails for the older ones, that alone deals with our 60 and over. So within that 60 and over, because of the lifespan being what it is, we have a whole diversity in those two chapters, 3 and 4, that is equivalent to the diversity among our seniors in general. So what do we mean by a third chapter? Now, when we look at the other chapters, clearly it presupposes that there's chapter 1 and 2. So those formative years and all the institutions that made us who we are and sculpted us and nurtured us to be a righteous person, God-fearing, law-abiding, I deliberately went to another holy book, which is the Bhagavad Gita. Because in that, we have, in Trinidad and Tobago, we are plural society, and the two largest groups are Afro and Indo. So I deliberately went to the Bhagavad Gita, and in just before it begins, it outlines the 4 goals of life. So again, that figure 4 appears. And the 4 goals of life are righteousness, wealth, pleasure, and liberation. And they didn't demarcate it by any age. These are just the stages of life. But they fit nicely into our 4 chapters. Because all the family and the school and the religion and the community molded us to be righteous and to be good citizens, as we say. The wealth during those working years, after you study and then you work, and remember in the Caribbean, we have a lot of informal workers who are the ones more self-employed. Some are unemployed, some are underemployed, but we have all of that in the mix. So in this adult life that we work and we have a multiplicity of roles that we juggle, and we just keep going. And when we are even tired or even want help or even want assistance, we look outward. Because all the institutions, especially in the Western world, have trained us to be looking outward when we need assistance, help, or boost. But here we are confronted now with the only time I'm going to use this word, retirement, because I'm using it in the context of it being a rite of passage. That is all it is. It is not that you are retired and you are now, oh Lord, where am I going now with my old self? No. Forget that. For the first time, maybe for a lot of us, in terms of our reflection, introspection, we then discover, wait a minute, something is happening here. There's another school of thought which doesn't deem retirement as a good thing. That is the economic system, better well known for us in the West especially as capitalism. And there is such a book named Capitalism and Aging, where it dealt with this blow, this mandatory blow called retirement, where subliminally what it is saying is, well, you kind of moving a little too slow. You're no longer productive as you used to be or should be, given what is happening in the marketplace. And that market is not the ones where we buy our veggies. That's the economic market. And they impose this mandatory retirement just at that point at which we are at the the best in the profession, and even for the ones who are not lettered, but are in the informal network, that's when they know their craft, they know their skill, they know streetwise, they know how to dance, they know how to advertise and make their products sell and be good. So capitalism has said, we don't need you anymore here. Besides wanting to make space for young, vibrant, youthful, qualified, all of these good old things. And so because there is this countervailing force of ageism, because most of the isms have come out of capitalism, sexism, racism, classism, ageism is one, where there's prejudice, discrimination against those who are old, and even for the others at the beginning of the spectrum, when they now leave school and want to go into the marketplace to get jobs commensurate with their qualifications, they are asked for experience. Where will they get the experience? If not at the hands sometimes, or at the feet of the older ones who have already aced that and are moving out just when even the institution will need that experiential learning, that institutional memory, which cannot be monetized in one fell swoop because it's so soft. And what happens? Some of us don't treat with it very well. Because in gerontology, you deal with the physical, the emotional, and the psychological aspects of aging. And the psychological, it deals with the psyche. To feel that, what was the sense of all of this? And bit by bit, dependent on how you exit, if you didn't even have an exit interview, most of your prolific years between the ages of 18 and 60 or 65 were invested in this job, or let us call it work. Everything external to you. And of course, you have families of your own now and all the expenses that go with it. Because let us not fool ourselves, aging is now an economic issue. Don't put fluff around it. Not just because we are pensioners and so, no. It costs for care, even self-care. And this is the major part of what some of our seniors are afflicted with in chapter 3. Because some didn't even realize it's almost cataclysmic when they come to this bombshell, because they were looking forward to the retirement in their 50s. I will go sailing, I will take my cruise, I will fly here, visit my children. Oh, I have time. But where in our education system did it explain to us, how do we use time? What does time mean for us? And while you might have been deliberating that, for those of us in chapter 3, what am I to do with all this time? COVID came, leveled the playing field. Everything stopped. Never before did any of us, except the centenarians, have any idea what a pandemic is or was. But it just shut down. Because you see, nature always has to pause. That's how nature operates. It breathes. It has birth, it has sustenance, and it then has death. We are creatures of nature. And as a result of which, when we look at the birds and the tree, they rest. What do? And according to Deepak Chopra, we have now become human doings rather than human beings. Because to be means we have a climate, and I'm using the words of my previous presenter. We have a climate and an environment inside. But we were never trained sufficiently, or sometimes not at all, how to tap into that resource that we were born with. But just, hey, we breathe, we laugh, we go to bed, we wake up, all taken for granted. These involuntary processes that keep going. So in chapter 3, the questions start coming from a different space because now you have time. And the existential questions, who am I really? Why am I feeling this way? Different philosophers, different psychologists have said it in different ways. Carl Jung put it this way. The program of life's morning, which is our chapter 1 and 2, the program of life's morning does not fit into the program of life's evening. Because what was true in the morning would have become a lie by evening. And what was great in the morning would by evening be considered insignificant. So there's a flip. And then we also have Maslow, who did all the hierarchical needs, that we need to feel a sense of belonging, we need recognition, all of these things that we try to mold in the family structure. But now, as you would have learned from the other part of the series, the family structure has changed. So whereas the baby boomers, all of us born between 1946 and 64, we came out of extended families. So built into the fabric of the family was community. So we didn't know about loneliness. And we didn't have TV for many years. But now that we are living longer, thanks to technology, science, and improved sanitation and all the conditions that go with it, now that we are here, and we look back at all these exigencies that play on us, and we now have to almost be pushed to ask and look for the answer. But where? By who? Because something is impacting us now. Some of us, when COVID hit, were like in no man's land. What is this? And what was so unique about it, and to me creative, it didn't fit the five senses. You couldn't see it, hear it, touch it, taste it. None of the above. The only marker that we had that something was there, people were dying. And who were these people? Primarily the elderly. And when you drill down further, not just all of the elderly, but the ones with comorbidities. What is comorbidities? So once you hear co, you know it's not one. It has to be co-joined with something. And so when we realize now that outside of this group called the elderly, there are a significant number, because we know the toll, the death toll that happened and that took place globally. And when you drill down more into these comorbidities, what was it? Lifestyle. All based on lifestyle. And some of them were genetically predisposed to it. But with science being what it is now, through eugenics and quantum physics, they are now discovering, listen, don't just say, well, I am in the 4th generation of diabetes, so you know, I'm going to get it. Hello? Is that so? You are actually calling it to take root. We may be predisposed, but that doesn't mean that we are getting it. And so you start looking at the template. What is the template that you are designing, consciously or unconsciously, of how you would like to age in light of what COVID is presenting to you? So for those who had the attention really pivotal, you would have noticed, well, listen, this has to do with immune system being compromised. So maybe we need to boost this immune system. Mind you, That immune system was designed by the divine within us to deal with all extraneous and alien particles entering the body, to fight them, but based on lifestyle and the choices that we made in chapters 1 and 2 and continue to practice have compromised that immune system to our detriment. But what is also so good with the human being is that being creatures of nature, yes, what we have beyond the animal is the neocortex of the brain. We have what is called a triune brain. And that is what kicks in at times like this, when we have to deal with chapters 3 and 4. Because mind is not the brain. The brain is the organ, which I call the command center. But mind is at this point, where you think, you create, you invent, deal with logic, your thoughts, and every one of your thoughts is energy. So even some of us who are predisposed to just be warriors, not W-A-R-R, but W-O-R-R-I-E, when even there is nothing to worry about, warriors worry. What if? If only. Either regret the past or worry what if for the future, neither of which anything could be done with. And so we reach this point where many of us who had on our walls, in our offices, and our desks as an ornament, the Serenity Prayer, it takes on a whole new meaning. Grant me that serenity to accept the things that I cannot change. Some of us curse the rain. Imagine why this rain had to fall. Because you just did your pedicure or whatever it is. The rain is doing what it has to do. Balance. Balance. Because all before, we were complaining of the heat. That's nature. So nature has given us in this instrument, because that's what it is. This is an instrument. It's a tool that will fade when we are ready to discard. It has to be shed. Because none of us is coming out of life alive. None of us. So what are we doing while we are in this pathway of sustenance? We had birth already. We are here. And we all hope to experience chapters 3 and 4 wholesomely. And wholesomely doesn't mean that we don't have to walk with a cane and all these things. That has nothing to do with that internal self. That's just this, which will age just based on its physicality. And one major point that has to be hammered in is that so much attention over those chapters 1 and 2 was given to this external, cost-wise, image-wise, whatever-wise. And it is so subtle. Aging is so subtle. We have to understand that aging is at a cellular level. The process is at a cellular level. Involuntarily, we age. It is gradual, it is progressive, and it cannot be reversed. And so when we accept, because remember the first line of the Serenity Prayer, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change. So should I just deal with aging like, boy, listen to me, I mean, I had to go through this, boy, for another 60 years because this lady saying 120 and I feeling tired already, bored with my life. That's the self-talk of the ego. Because the ego will always rationalize and give you the prettiest of justifications as to why not you should change. So you have to defy that through willpower, through desire to be better, to be determined. And you know something? Whatever template you come up with to be, whether it is to be the better version, or some go to the superlative and want to be the best version, it requires discipline. Because the distance between your template of what you would like to be and your reality of where you are is discipline. One word. And in that discipline has 3 I's. So whenever you slip or you falter, it's all on you. I, and I. 3 I's. Don't blame anybody. So you start in chapter 3, knowing that deep down you want to experience chapter 4, which is for those over 80, 85. And you are now at 60, 65. Because chapter 3 goes up until about 75 to 80. And you are saying to yourself, man, I feel good. I feel vital. And you start cursing why I needed to retirement. But retirement, even though we saw what the capitalist side of it is, as being really blunt and without humanity in it, nature requires a pause. So if we shift and change the script and say, well, okay, I hear now. Let me see what I could do. And we start looking at how to boost this immune system. What immediately you'll be tapping into is your internal environment, where you now will learn that, wait a minute, I feel more energized now that I'm walking around my house, I'm planting, I'm dealing with fresh air instead of an air conditioned. And you know what happens? You start, and I would deliberately say, not falling in love. You start walking into love of self. Because that little subtle body within is the driver of this machine. So if you treat that internal one, I wouldn't even use the word properly, just right. You don't have to ask anybody if this is good for you. You actually feel good. It is an immediate response. And those little energy centers that are along your spine, no instrument could see them or feel them, but they are there and they're busy working all the time. So can you imagine if you had this all of your life up till this point, unknowingly, unconsciously, and now you know consciously that they are there. When you know better, you got to do better. So now that you know better, how do I tap into that resource? Guess what? And notice all the solutions I'm giving have nothing to do with a cost, because it's already in the instrument. Now you deal with breath. And just through the breath, check your breath when you get angry, when you get bereaved, when you get stumped with some massive disappointment or loss. Check your breath. It like almost you're choking. Some people's voice goes because you're holding so much tension in the throat. And the throat is one of the energy centers. So if that occurs almost automatically when you are in a negative feeling, what if I could do the opposite and engage in proper diaphragm breaths to energize me? So, and I'll change my language accordingly. Instead of I'm tired, just, I need some more energy. And what quantum physics has said is that we have 3 brains, one mental, one emotional, and the third one is in the gut. That's your battery. All energized by the breath. So with each inhalation we take for granted, 50% of it is oxygen, which the blood needs to carry your corpuscles to where they have to go. And the other 50% is energy from in the ether, from in the atmosphere, every breath that we take. So far less if you learn how to do the technique consciously. It's amazing. I do it, I'm speaking from experience. And when you do that, and when you start consciously knowing that this is all designed to boost your immune system, you will realize the diet that you were on that had more D-I-E in it than the T at the end. Let me change that. Your seasonings and all that goes with it. And so we have to understand what Maslow said is, at that stage, that third going into the fourth, you experience what is called healthy selfishness. It sounds oxymoronic. Healthy selfishness. This is me on me. That's the selfish part, but guess what? You're actually sculpting a new person. And I saw my sign, and I'm happy for that I have the 5 more minutes. Because as fate would have it, and I don't just believe in these things, a very dear friend had sent me a WhatsApp. I think it was just yesterday. And that was, I said as soon as I read it, that is how I will be closing my presentation. This is what a 75-year-old person, when asked about turning 80, this is what he said. After loving my parents, siblings, spouse, children, and friends, I have now started loving myself. 2, I have realized that I'm not Atlas. The world does not rest on my shoulders. 3, I have stopped bargaining with vegetable and fruit vendors. A few pennies more is not going to break me, but it might help the poor fellow save for his daughter's school fees. 4, I stopped telling the elderly that they have already narrated that story many times. This story makes them walk down memory lane and relive their past. 5, the onus of making everyone perfect is not on me. Peace is more precious than perfection. 6, I give compliments freely and generously. Compliments are a mood enhancer, not only for the recipient, but also for me. And a small tip for the recipient of a compliment, never, never turn it down. Just say thank you. 7, I have learned not to bother about a crease or a spot on my shirt. Personality speaks louder than appearances. 8, I walk away from people who don't value me. They might not know my worth, but I do. 9, I remain cool when someone plays dirty to outrun me in the rat race. I am not a rat, and neither am I in a race. 10, I have learned that it's better to drop the ego than to break a relationship. My ego will help me to keep aloof, whereas with relationships, I'll never be alone. 11, I have learned to live each day as if it's the last. After all, it might be the last. And the last one, I'm doing what makes me happy. I am responsible for my happiness, and I owe it to myself. Happiness is a choice. You can be happy at any time. Just choose to be. To be. That verb must resonate within you. And know that you are priceless. Out of all the 6 billion in the world, there is no other like you. Because each of us is an original. cannot be replicated, duplicated, nothing. Bless it, treat it as you would treat your pet, generously, laugh loud, belly laugh. That's your battery in the gut. You have to make sure you treat that gut well. You do not eat until you're full, because it takes 20 minutes for the intestine to message the brain that you are full. So you know what we do in those 20 minutes? We eat more because we're not feeling full. But you should just, again, pause. Because those of us, I'm ending now, who have done music theory will know that even in music theory, there's a symbol called the rest. And when you rest, you don't keep your fingers on the keyboard, you actually raise your fingers off in rest mode. We need to be truly in love with who we are. Because, Erik Erikson, who designed the chart of maturation in his final 2 stages, which align with our chapters 3 and 4. In 3, he said you should be in generativity. That's your task, where we look to be more volunteers and doing philanthropy and a lot of altruism. That comes naturally at that age. If you don't and just start crying like, you disengage and want to be just feeling sorry for yourself, then you will stagnate. And the final stage, he said, must be ego integrity, otherwise known as ego integration, where all of the parts of you, none of them is to be disowned. Own all of them. Because what I wanted to open with, but I will close with, the mere fact that we are here, we have survived loss, we have survived disappointments, we have survived betrayals, we have survived a rocky road. But don't curse the path. Don't curse the past either. Because you're now moving towards the template that you yourself have designed, that you could see as doable, and that is important for you to experience this 3rd and 4th chapter with vitality rather than despair and with stagnation. That doesn't cut it. So I thank you all, and I hope you will glean from this that God ain't finished with us yet. As we are here, we are still works in progress. And now we know better. We can do better. And laughter is that tonic that cannot be bottled because it secretes so much serotonin, which the gut is responsible for charging. So let us treat our body as we do our pets, and treat it in a positive thought form, because negative thoughts affect the energy level. Be positive, be forward looking, have the desire, the discipline, the determination, and we'll get there together. Thank you.
Wow. Wow. A lot to digest to give us a whole, as I say, a 6-course dinner. Dr. Rose, thank you so much for that wonderful presentation. I myself will make sure and remember this one: discipline, 3 I's. So the discipline in diet and this gut, I'll always remember. Yes, I personally remember about this gut. Thank you so much.
You're most welcome.
Right, it's very educational, and some of those 11 points, I think I will, I'm sure a lot of us will like to, have some record of that 11 points somewhere, if you can download it somewhere, right?
Sure.
Okay, well, I guess these presentation just whet our audience appetite, and we'll have to maybe do something in between, maybe by the end of the year or something like that, because people are quite eager for knowledge, and which is good. So, in wrapping up, because we are more or less coming to the close of time, I would just like to invite Miss Mona Thompson to do a vote of thanks. And I would like to remind you all, those of you who haven't done your evaluation form, to, give us your thoughts on the evaluation, your thoughts, comments, whatever. Thank you. Ms. Thompson, the floor is yours.
What a wonderful evening we had. So as we wrap up our webinar series for 2024, it was entitled Aging Empowerment, Navigating the Journey to Vitality, Purpose and Well-Being. And with our evening's topic being Preparing for Aging, we received so much valuable information. We need to go it over. First of all, I wish to thank today's presenters, Dr. Deborah Joseph and Dr. Jennifer Rouse, who took time out of their busy schedules to have to share their extensive knowledge and expertise with us. You can feel the passion with which they presented. They delivered their presentations and it was greatly appreciated. Dr. Joseph took us through aging and climate change and clarified for us what climate change entailed and how it affected the aging population. And all the things that we can put into place, she being a policy lady, to advance ourselves. Dr. Rouse inspired us with a presentation preparing for the third and fourth chapters of aging and how we can view aging in a new and different way. And how, as you just said, we have to continue this process that we began through the webinar. And thanks to our chairperson for this evening session, Ms. Diane Grant, who took us smoothly through the process. Special thanks go to our organizers and planning committee, Dr. Enid Cambridge, Dr. Deborah Joseph, Mr. Camille Cummings, and of course our technical crew, Ms. Anika Noriega, Ms. Crystal Oliver, and Mrs. Andrea Pinero. And to all other members of the committee who contributed in any way towards the output of this webinar series to make it all possible. A warm thank you goes out as well to all the past presenters and chairpersons who gave up their time and delivered professionally. Also to the board of the Coterie social workers and to all participants who attended and took time to register and complete evaluations and who faithfully followed and participated in this, our 2024 webinar series.
Okay.
And, now, we always like to close off with a prayer to give God thanks and praise. So let's pray. Father, we thank you for leading and guiding us through this webinar, making available for all the presenters who give up their time and expertise. We thank you, Lord, for the information that we received and for the successful outcome of the series. Lord, continue to cover us and guide us in all things as we continue. And as Christians, we say in Jesus' name, amen.
Aging Empowerment Series, Navigating the Journey to Vitality, Purpose and Well-Being.